United States 1, Germany 3. United States 4, Ghana 0. Those were the results of the US Men's National Team October camp, and then we must answer some questions. Do the results even matter? Did we make any progress? Was this camp worth it? Was it a success? And that is what we're going to talk about today. Hi, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV, and welcome to our USMNT October camp recap. If you guys remember, back in September, I did a September recap, and I told you how I thought the September camp was a failure, a disaster, kind of useless actually. Not a disaster, just useless, a waste of time. Now we're going to talk about the October camp, where I actually thought it was a success. I thought some progress was made, and today we're going to bring USMNT Stan, Adam from Twitter, fantastic account, go follow him. We're going to talk about players that had their stocks going up, players that had their stocks going down, rate the camp, rate Greg Berhalter, talk about the positives and the negatives. And you can let me know in the comment section below right now which players had their stocks go up and why, which players had their stocks go down, and also tell me why. And now I sound like the Backstreet Boys. And since I have my thumbs up right now, drop a like in the video for the YouTube algorithm. Let's play the intro, let's bring in Adam, and let's talk about the US Men's National Team. All right, everyone, we're back for another camp recap. Last time I did it on my own. This time I'm actually bringing a guest, a friend of the channel that you all should be familiar with now, and he actually attended one of the games. Adam, welcome back. I don't need to introduce you, right?
All good, man. Yeah, Tack, it's good to be back. I'm excited. I feel like this is like the first really meaningful camp that we've had since Nations League, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, good opponents, our top guys, the whole thing together. So I'm excited to talk about it. We learned a lot, I feel like.
Yeah, and also, I guess the strongest, well, there's some debate to be made in regards to Ghana's performance because of Ghana.
Yeah.
But we played Germany, a top team in the world, regardless of their form, and them tying Mexico. It's still friendly. But when you look at their players on paper, when you have Leroy Sané, Jamal Musiala, Gundogan, these are players that are competing to win the Champions League every season, essentially. So that's the level that we were facing. And just to recap here to everyone, we played 2 matches this camp. We lost to Germany the first one, which will address what happened in that game. There was good, there was bad. And then we defeated Ghana 4-0 in one of the most dominant first half performances I've ever seen from the United States, facing an opponent that's not a Caribbean island, I would say. And then the second half might have put a few people to sleep here and there. But Adam, before we talk about, we're going to give our biggest issues, biggest positives, players that had stock up, stock down, and everyone in the comment section can drop that. You went to the Germany game. I want to get your perspective from the stadium, because you were, whatever thoughts you have to share, you were there. It's always different when you watch the match at the location in regards to the TV, not just the experience, but even from a tactical standpoint, players' performance, you observe things that we don't see at home. So what were your thoughts? Share with us.
Yeah, it's funny. I always forget that like your service dies at stadiums too. So it's like you're not even really a part of the dialogue, dead balls. I'm not checking Twitter and kind of seeing what people are thinking halftime. So I got none of that. I kind of went on the timeline after and kind of scrolled. But yeah, I always find it interesting to watch a game totally encumbered by others' opinions. As much as we think we're independent thinkers, we all go on Twitter somewhat, right? And we're like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that. Like, that's a good idea. So it was interesting to kind of see what lined up, what didn't. First of all, really good crowd. It looked like it was going to be, 3/4 full, and it ended up being the largest soccer crowd in the history of that stadium that's in Hartford. Almost 40,000. Mostly 2/3 American fans. A lot of German fans showed up as well, but awesome energy, great vibe for a friendly. I feel like friendlies are usually really low energy, and the first half felt like a game that mattered. It really did, from the players on the field. Clearly the lineups, the energy in the crowd, the German fans, were a little bit tense for sure. The German fans in my area, because of their recent failure, right? And this is a big game for them, I think, trying to get themselves going. Huge game for us. First really quality opponent we've, faced kind of on the European scale, at least since the World Cup. So it mattered. I hated when I would post a couple things after the game and people like, it's a friendly, it doesn't matter. I was like, no, that game mattered. Like, those guys cared. Now, second half, Once everybody started making subs, it was a little bit of a different story. 70th minute on, but we lost that game 3-1 to a mostly full German side, and it was a mostly complete United States side as well. But my high level thought on that game, Tack, is who are we going to be, versus the best teams? Who are we going to be? And we got to figure that out. That question is not answered.
Yeah, I think when we go to biggest positives, negatives, that might be something we address outside of the overall perspective of the game. The first half, I thought we went toe-to-toe with Germany with maybe a slight advantage to Germany, but nothing too big. It was 1-1, and we had chances to score. They had chances to score. But second half, especially when De La Torre came in for Gio, one, there is a downgrade from the player itself, right? One of our best players comes off and one of our roster pieces comes in. There's a drop off. But then tactically also it played a big role. We shifted. We're more of like a 4-2-3-1 on a defensive shape. It looked like a 4-4-2. When De La Torre came in, we went back to that flat 4-3-3, and that created some space in the middle. Things we can talk about later in the video that tactically didn't play out in our favor. Germany also pressed us a bit better in the second half, didn't give us as much space in transition. That was another issue. And again, I think sometimes, and we'll talk about this, the mere presence of a player like Gio Reyna, Pulisic, Balogun, it frees up space for more players. Because if you only have, go back to the World Cup where we didn't have Balogun and Gio, they could just double team or triple team Pulisic. And then the rest, they're good players, but they're not going to decide the game. And Pulisic was the one that was decisive in the games. Now, if you have to face Pulisic, Balogun, and Gio, you can't really triple team or double team one because you have to worry about the other guys. And that naturally frees up space to other players. And I think that's one thing I took away from the Ghana game. Let's talk about the Ghana game since we talked about Germany, our collapse in the second half and the loss. Tim Weah is probably one of our best players. And I think the simply having Gio, Balogun, and Pulisic on the field, even if they don't play well, it helps create space for Weah. And once Weah has space, you see that pace. You saw that against Germany, too, in a few occasions. Him having enough space because they're concerned about the other players to perform. Now, if they double team Weah, I don't think he'll be as effective as a Pulisic, a Balogun, or Gio. But you give him space, he's dangerous. And he showed that in both matches. So I think that's one big thing from this match. And then against Ghana, just to oversimplify the match, we both watched it from home. First half, complete dominance. 4-0, Gio Reyna 2 goals, Christian Pulisic off a penalty kick, Balogun scored a goal. Pretty much every single player played well. I don't remember anyone. Even Turner made a good save when it was required. And then the second half, lots of subs happened at halftime. I believe we took out Pulisic, Gio, and Balogun at halftime, right? Against Ghana? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so big drop off right there. The three players we talked about. And then the second half was just 0-0. None of the teams seemed to really care much. But then let's go into takes of this camp. And maybe I'll let you go first here. Your biggest issue, like looking into both games, you're like, this has to be addressed. This has to be fixed. I'm really concerned about this, if there was any, of course.
Yeah, my biggest issue is kind of like my biggest worry, and it's pretty big picture, Tack. Like I liken Greg to like a doctor, right? I've just been thinking about this thing recently where it's like, all right, if I had a doctor who over the last 4 years, I knew that they had prescribed the wrong medicine, they had, messed up a couple surgeries, right? Like you wouldn't have trust in that doctor.
Gave you the wrong sleeping pills.
Gave you like if a doctor, right? And you don't, as a doctor, right? Like it's not about, but he got it right 70% of the time, right? If a doctor gets it wrong 30% of the time, that's a massive issue, right? Like, and that's how, I don't think Greg gets everything wrong, right? I think there are a lot of people who do, and I think a lot of people pin that on you very often, right? And Pete, and that's just not true. You guys, if you watch you a lot, I watch almost all your videos, you constantly give him credit for the things he's doing right? And
we gave him a 9 for the Ghana game, which the only player with a higher rating was Gio Reyna. Everyone else was below Greg.
For sure.
Maybe Weah, maybe actually.
That's the thing about the Greg hate that I feel like a lot of the whatever the bots or supporter, whatever they are, they think like, oh, everybody's coming at Greg. Like, no, like what we don't want is we don't want a manager who gets 30% of stuff wrong. I don't want a doctor who gets 30% of stuff wrong. So like my biggest issue and biggest worry is like, what's Greg's growth been, and what's it going to look like? so my biggest issue is like, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, right? The Ghana game specifically, we can kind of get into that, and we can get into our rating on Greg later. I've got an interesting kind of take on that. But my biggest issue is like, do we have a doctor who's going to continue to get 30% of stuff wrong, or do we have a doctor who's going to be, pretty spot on? And you're not always going to get it right. I get that, but you can't have the big issues. We can't have like the Panama lineup. We can't have some of the rosters and roster decisions and continued leaving out guys who clearly were going to be good players. So my biggest issue is specific to Germany, right? This is what's remaining for me, all the question marks that are out there. Can this manager get us to a place where we compete with, a Germany level team, right? And like, I get the name of Germany is top 5 in the world. That's not the current state of their roster, right? They're still really good. They're still top 10 to 15. It's hard to argue otherwise. But can he get us to a place, forget about Brazil, forget about France, can he get us to a place where we're really competitive with the 6 to 15 range, right? I thought we saw in the World Cup a tale of two games. England, really competitive. Netherlands, I didn't think we were very competitive in that game. No. We've got, for us to win and make a run, we've got to be competitive game in, game out. And you're not going to win every game. I get that, but it has to feel really competitive walking out of the building. And at the 70-minute mark against Germany, I didn't feel competitive. I didn't. Like, it was a great first 30 minutes, but overall I was like, they killed us. Like 30 minutes isn't enough in soccer, guys, right?
Yeah. In my opinion, I think what we need, the next step for us is to make every single team in the world, even the best teams, fear us or at least not want to play us. So, for example, you talked about like Brazil, France, these big boys, better than Germany probably, even though Brazil has been struggling on their own lately, but they'll figure it out by the World Cup. We need to make them struggle, like the Dutch game. It didn't feel like the Dutch struggled in the World Cup to beat us. It's okay to lose to Netherlands in the World Cup, lose to Germany. That can happen. They're good teams. They're better than us on paper, actually. But make them work for it. Make it a scrappy 1-0 win, or they have to really fight for it. It felt like the Dutch were on cruise control. And that's what it felt like in the second half against Germany. They were on cruise control, just going through the motions and beating us. It has to be tough. We need to make it tough for everyone. We understand we're not the best team in the world. We're not top 10. I don't think we're even top 15 on paper. So when you take that into account, that's what I meant. Now, when you make it tough for everyone, you put yourself on a position like Morocco. Morocco's not a top 4 team in the world. And people will say, oh, they got a bit lucky in the World Cup. Of course they did. You need a little bit of luck on everything to make things work. But they put themselves in that position because they made it tough for everyone. If you make it tough, all you need is one ball, one goal, and then all of a sudden you're through. So that's the next step for Greg and the U.S. men's national team is we've showed that we have quality to punish these big teams. We can score on them, but make it scrappy. How? Well, I'm not a professional coach. I'm not in charge, and I don't get paid for that. So he has to figure that out, and it can vary for each opponent. So that's one of the concerns I share. My biggest issue, which I think could be resolved very quickly. It's just, I think we couldn't resolve this in this camp because one of the players wasn't available. We clearly don't really have yet, until Malik Tillman is back, a backup to Gio Reyna. Every time he would come out, it's a player that is completely different attributes, different style of play, not a playmaker. So Reyna came off and that changes every time. When Tillman is there, maybe he's the one, but then it seems like those are the only 2 players in this player pool that we have. That's a bit concerning. That's not really on Berhalter or the program. It's what we have. So there has to be maybe a backup plan from Greg to still look fluid, still look creative without being the MMA midfield, because I think that one is only for very specific situations, maybe late in the game, holding a draw. We don't have that backup to Giovanni Reyna, and we saw how crucial he is, not from just a quality standpoint, but a tactical standpoint of how we play. That's one of my biggest issues or concerns right now.
So Tack, when we were talking a little basketball right before this, right, with your fantasy draft coming up, but like I think everybody, even hardcore soccer fans, know Steph Curry, know the Golden State Warriors. They understand that idea, right? This guy is generational shooter, right? Now, I'm not saying on the world stage Gio is exactly that yet, for sure, but like where it works is the team comparison, right? When Steph walks off the floor, the Warriors have to change the way they play a little bit. They don't change everything, right? They don't full stop become a different team, but they can't just sub in the backup point guard, whoever it's been through the years, and be like, hey, do what Steph does. No, that's not possible, right? So because that guy can't do what Steph Curry does, their offense has to work in a different way, right? They have to use different trigger points. They have to go to different options. They have to run different actions, right? All that. And it's very similar in soccer, in my opinion, where it's like, okay, if you have Messi and he's on the field, your team's going to look different when you take him off, right? And so how do
Very
you
different.
account for that? Like everybody can't be looking around for Messi in the middle of the pitch to get things done, right? And similar to our team, when Gio stepped off, right? And that's going to take some time, right? And we have to also just keep in mind the Gio Reyna experience with the USMNT is not, we're not that deep into it, right? He's been hurt a lot. We got to get used to him. I'm really glad Greg played him where he played him. But I agree with you. Like, we need to build tactical flexibility. It kind of goes back to my issue, right? My issue, which is more the tactical flexibility against high level teams. But like, can we flex how we play based on who's available, which we know is going to change? It has a lot in the last 2-3 years, right?
Yeah.
Available, what the lineup is, who the opponent is, what the opponent's tactics are, what the opponent shows in the first half that maybe we didn't scout for that now we need to adjust for. All of those things need to allow us to flex somewhat tactically. I thought last cycle we were so rigid with like the 4-3-3 and the pressing and how we played.
MMA.
And I was actually excited to see us flex a little bit. I don't think we got it right yet, but I thought he was trying different things out. He just needs, to your point, I'm not a pro coach, you're not a pro coach. He needs to figure out, how do we get it right based on opponent and our personnel and who's on the field.
Mm-hmm. And then maybe if Tillman is close enough, I think Gio's ahead of Tillman in terms of talent, but in terms of like style of play, being able to create and play make, it's similar. So if you don't have Gio Reyna and Tillman can fill that gap, he might be good enough to not, for the team not to feel the impact as much. You can still implement the same style of play. Let's move on. Let's move on from this because we already gave our biggest issue, each one, which I guess they're easy fixes over the course of the next 12 months. What's your biggest positive of this camp?
My biggest positive is I thought this camp reminded me of, it was like a late 2020 camp or maybe 2021. It was Musa's first camp. I remember watching like the MMA midfield for the first time and being like, whoa, there's just the players, right? The mix of guys, seeing, and it was like, whoa, there's something there, right? That is special and that is different. At that point, it was like, that's a different level midfield than what we've seen from the USMNT in the past. Different type of players. The front line is my biggest positive. Like seeing that front four with Gio orchestrating, similar to the summer, Balo doing what he does, Pooley and Weah, and seeing them play off each other and balance each other out. And especially last game with Des getting involved down the right. It was so awesome. It was so special and just really fun, right? And I think like you can very easily point to Gio as like the key cog in it all, which totally agree he is. But it's like this mix of guys is really special. And I think the word you were kind of mentioning before, right? How Gio opens space for other guys. And like one of the words that I used for years as a basketball coach is if you have players with gravity, right? And their gravity means guys are drawn to them. You have to account for them. Multiple players are going to be worried about them. When you have players on the field with gravity, sometimes they make impact without even touching the ball, without even getting the ball fed to them. And when I looked at that front four, it was just really cool to see like the gravity Gio had in the middle, how defenses had to account for that. The gravity Balo has making runs, the gravity Pooley now has on the left, the gravity Weah has on the right doing what he does. So there's a lot of guys with gravity now. And I think Gio specifically and how much energy he attracts from the defense makes life really easy on Pulisic, right? In the past, we've said, why does Pulisic suck? God, back when he was playing with Leggett and Acosta, it was like, Pulisic stinks. And it's like, guys, Pulisic doesn't stink, right? If you play Steph Curry on a team with a bunch of guys who can't shoot, he's going to look a lot different than he looks with Klay Thompson and all the guys he's gotten to play with during his career, right? So, very similar here. So that front line is just a thing of beauty, Tack. I'm excited for it.
I would even say, well, I think this will be a very popular opinion. That is the most talented front line the United States men's national team has ever had. It's not even close. We can argue about history, effectiveness of like Lyndon Donovan, Clint Dempsey, and many others that have played there. Josie is nowhere near Balogun, in my opinion. When you look at all of that, you look at Pulisic, Reyna, Gio Reyna, Tim Weah, and Balogun, it's simply amazing that we have that. And one thing to say too, so this is my overall positive. I thought the camp was very good. We're going to get to camp ratings at the end of the video. And why do I think it was very good? Both second halves were awful, in my opinion, from the United States.
Great.
Awful or mediocre. But if you get the 90 minutes that our best players played, which was the two first halves, we had a 1-1 draw with Germany, where we were playing toe-to-toe Germany with our best players against most of their best players. And we beat Ghana 4-0 in the first half with our best players. So when you take that context, you're like, what did our best players on the field do? because these are friendlies. If they weren't friendlies, they would probably be on the field for most of the match. And that's what you get: a 1-1 draw with Germany, a 4-0 win against Ghana. I saw progress. We saw Gio play central with under Anthony Hudson and BJ, but we never seen it under Berhalter, and he did it. So props to him for that. I know we've been screaming that for like 2.5 years, but he finally did it, and clearly he stick to it, right? Because he did it in both matches, and he thinks that's the best way to go forward, and it was effective. We definitely could improve a little bit of how we utilize or how we feed Balogun. I think that's something to fix. But Greg adjusted Balogun's positioning. He wasn't playing as a false nine like he did in another game. I think it was against Uzbekistan or Oman. So there was progress. And I think every time these camps, even though we lost to Germany, they're more about progress than results. I even said this before the game. If we beat Ghana just 1-0, but we created loads of chances, maybe we were just not clinical, that's fine. It's about the performance. And overall, when our best players were there, we performed well. And I think that's what matters. So overall, the biggest positive of this camp is there was actual progress, unlike September, which to me was completely useless against Oman and Uzbekistan. Completely useless. We got to see a little bit of Johnny be effective, so now we can give him more opportunities. That was important because we keep talking about backup six, because Moose is not truly a six. De La Torre is not truly a six. We don't want Acosta back. Johnny is a six. So he looked very competent against Germany in the 10, 15 minutes he had. And he looked good against Ghana in the first half. So again, give him more chances. Things like that. Our depth seems to be increasing. I thought Christopher Lund didn't really impress me, but again, he became a player like, okay, you can give him more minutes. Looks like a bit of a faster Sam Vines, so there's something there. So overall, there was progress in multiple areas. You talked about the front four, everything, and Greg Berhalter behaved like an adult in the sideline. That was good too. No bounce passes, nothing. That I think that's a bonus. With that said, let's go.
I also saw that they're showing him less. I saw somebody tweet that, and it kind of clicked in my head. I was like, yeah, that's true. Like they're not constantly showing him on the broadcast. I wonder if that's tactical, like from them, like because I agree, like the bounce passes are gone. Some of the silly, goofy stuff is gone, which I hope he gets rid of it, right? Because he needs to take a much lower profile, just to kind of gain some trust back.
Well, you coach, Adam, so you probably have seen this with your team, and following soccer for so long, you start to notice that teams absorb the personality of their coach very often. Like you see Atletico Madrid, the way they play, like that screams Simeone. Manchester City with Pep Guardiola, Liverpool with Klopp. You look at the teams and they absorb the personality of their coach, and sometimes for the better or for the worse. Berhalter being childish and acting that way, the team becomes very immature and childish itself. Some of the attitudes you see. Our boys always fight. They always fight for it. But sometimes it just gets like the little bit of that Berhalter vibe in the field. And I don't think that's the best personality. You need to be able to smell blood. You need to be like a bit more fierce sometimes and not be afraid to take on opponents. And with Berhalter, we seem very passive, his personality. And I think him toning down on that silliness that it was, because it was very silly what he kept doing. Like doing it once, it's funny, but he kept doing it every game. It was getting annoying, right? Because you're an adult. Just give the ball normally, and other things like the selfie against Honduras. I think that plays a role. I know it may seem even a bit of a silly or superficial analysis, but I think it does play a role. And you see that with multiple teams in Europe. But going on, let's do this. You want me to go first, or you go first on the player stock up and stock down? Who do you want? Want me to go first or you?
Yeah, I'll go first. My first stock up, I'm gonna pivot a little bit to something maybe not everybody's thinking of is I think stock up Tyler Adams. And here's the why. Stock up Tyler Adams because if you rewatch, I'm gonna post a video either tomorrow or Friday. I'm trying to get some time to do one of my breakdowns. I haven't done a breakdown in a long time, and I kind of am going to break down the goals that we let up against Germany and some of the other really good opportunities Germany had. Almost all of them are coming right through zone 14 in the middle, and oftentimes you can really find either one of the two midfielders in the double pivot just not fully understanding the instincts, the placement, right, where to be. And that is Tyler Adams' strength, right? And I think what at least is very clear to me is if we're going to play a team like Germany, personally, I do not think we're going to outpossession that team. Like, I think if we try and play Germany or any high-level team the way we played in the first half, that doesn't favor us, right? If you really watch it back, like we had a lot of chances, Germany had a lot of chances. I don't know if that's the way we want to go about it in a game like Germany, right? I don't think we want a game where it's like they get a lot, we get a lot. I just don't think we're going to win that game in the long run, right? Like, We need to play a game that's a little bit tighter. And I think that's where Adams is really good, and where we maybe don't have the ball quite as much, which doesn't fit Adams, right? He's not the guy who's going to tiki-taka the way up the field, right? But he
I
can
have
be
a
really good.
question there. I actually have a question. So that part of the analysis is more specific to the German game, right? Not Ghana.
Yeah, this is for me, the stock up is like, hey, you could see the value against a high-level team of what Adams can bring to that double pivot. I don't think we need to change tactics. I think he can just be one of those two guys, and he can be sniffing danger out. He can be the guy that sits back. I thought a couple times we got caught out because Musa, De La Torre, and McKennie, right, on a couple of the goals that I'm breaking down, got caught up the field. And, because they're just pushing up, that's what they always do. And I think Adams, he's going to sit back. He doesn't like to drive the ball forward. There's so much value in having him in a game like that, right? I think on the flip side, right, I also had Tyler Adams stock down in games because he's been a lock starter no matter the opponent in the past. So his stock down is for a game like Ghana, right? And
So
it kind
he's
of
stock up and stock down for you?
he's both, because I think what we're learning about Tyler Adams is the biggest value on this roster that he has is in a game we need to be defensive, in a game we maybe aren't going to have as much of the ball, in a game we need to be really solid in the back. He's going to be really valuable in a game where the team is going to give us the ball like Ghana did, right? Or like regional opponents do. Maybe he's not the best opponent, right? Like, I don't know if he can do some of the things we saw Johnny do in game two. And
So
so
let me see if I understood this. What you're saying is Tyler Adams' stock went up and down because he went from a locked-in starter to a situational player, but vital in certain situations. Was that the oversimplification of it?
Germany, I walked out of the game going, Tyler Adams, stock up. We need him in a game like that. Ghana, I walked out going, ooh, Tyler Adams, stock down. Like, I'm not sure I prefer him in that game. I don't know if we're quite as good in possession as we are, with a guy. And Johnny has more to prove. I'm not here to say, hey, he's starting. But I'm just saying, is there a configuration of players and a configuration of that double pivot without Adams that's better against, Panama, whoever we're going to play? I don't know if do we have the opponent locked in for the
Trinidad and Tobago.
TNT? Yeah. So I don't know if he's the best player for that. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. I mean, but yeah, so kind of an interesting up and down for me on him.
Yeah, I wish we had played Johnny more against Germany, maybe in the first half, in the situation you mentioned, because Johnny's tactical awareness is actually quite impressive. He doesn't tackle as much as Tyler because he sits back a bit more and goes for interceptions, and he gets a lot of them. He's one of the best in Brazil at that. So aerial duels, I think it's a case where I don't think anyone should or put Johnny ahead of Tyler defensively at the moment. We need to see him playing against better competition.
Let's see more.
In general.
Let's see. Yeah, and I have him on my list here. I'm sure you do too, but let's see more. But the Adams piece is going to be interesting. I think we all need to be open to the fact that he has been really, really good for us. He's one of my favorite players on the roster, but he might not be similar to the tactics, right? I don't know if the tactics need to be the same every single game. I know Gio needs to be in the middle, but I think we need a flex. We need to flex personnel. We need to flex tactics for opponent. And I think that was really clear this camp.
Yeah, and I think those are good problems to have. Like we said, that's increasing depth, right? Tyler Adams, go back 6 months ago or roughly like that. Oh, locked in starter, no one can touch him. Now the fact that we're having a conversation like, okay, this guy's coming up, let's watch out for it. That's something, and that's good for every position. Now, of course, there's some players that will be untouchable. Every team has that. But I think Tyler Adams, with the good things he does and the limitations he has, he's the type of player that shouldn't be untouchable. Should be something like what you said.
Or just Musa McKennie.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Musa McKennie, I mean, we saw that in the summer. It was great against Canada, Mexico. Like, so I don't know. There's configurations of that midfield without Tyler that I think we're all starting to envision, and that's stock down. But I think Germany specifically, you watch those goals back, you watch the breakdown I'm going to put out in the next couple of days, and you're going to be able to envision like, oh yeah, I could see where Adams might have gotten in the mix there and broken that up, right? It's really easy to see his potential value there.
I want us to test Johnny more too, because I want to see because even that, like, Johnny and Adams are sort of the same position, but very different players for that position. So maybe even in certain situations, it might be something to consider. We'll see. Johnny has a lot to prove, while Tyler has already played against good opponents. My stock up is Malik Tillman, even though he didn't play, because we saw the need for that 10 behind Gio. Like, there was no one else. So it's like, kind of need to have him in the roster, man, because Gio can get injured. Gio might need a sub, and that forces you to change the tactics. Now, you can sub out Gio and change the tactics, but you also want to have the option of subbing out Gio and keeping the same tactics. So Malik Tillman's stock went up for me, and the stock down for me was actually Luca De La Torre. Still a roster player for myself, but the issue with Luca was he didn't play well against Germany, and against Ghana came in that second half that nothing, so didn't really do anything to move his stock up. So that's the first thing. The second thing was we just mentioned Johnny finally played with the best players and was competent. That moved Johnny a bit up. That hurts Luca because when you think about it, let's put it this way. Let's try to build our depth chart right here. When you look at the 10 or the attacking midfielder, the first two players are going to say are Gio and Tillman. And then when you look at the 8, if I tell you, give me 2 players at the 8, Adam, who are you giving? Musa and McKennie.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so no De La Torre. Now the 6, if you had to give 2 players right now and you can't repeat a name, you're going to go Tyler and Johnny. So all of a sudden, Luca is like number 3 on 2 of those. And he wasn't that like the last camp. So I think stock down for Luca De La Torre for this one. Not because he did anything wrong. It's mainly just the way players play, and there's players ahead of him. That's what I would put. I think I made sense.
You did. I'll give a couple others. We don't need to talk at length. I mean, obviously Gio stock up. I just want to mention that. So anybody's like, what are these guys talking about? Gio's an obvious stock up. But honestly, I'm not sure it stocks up for me personally. Like my stock was sky high on him, but I think as a community, stock is up. I think a lot of the people who weren't necessarily full believers from the summer to now are like, wow, okay, yeah, I'm a believer of him in the middle and what it can do. I hope. I think you'd have to be pretty dumb to not be. My second one is stock up to like our depth. You just mentioned it, but specifically stock up to depth. If Luca De La Torre is dropping down, he is starting in La Liga, right? He didn't get worse in the last 6 months. His stock going down even a little bit means our stock is going up as a team and our depth's going up. I'm with you on Lund. I think a lot of people were like really hyping him yesterday. Solid performance, solid. I think that he looks good in possession, which is kind of a nice thing to have in certain games, especially like that. I feel like he's clean in possession, and where Jedi, even in a game like that against the worst opponent, sometimes messes stuff up, just kind of sloppy, doesn't rondo as well, doesn't connect the pieces as well. So I liked it. He looked competent. Still need to see more, but it was good to see him against a better opponent, not a September opponent. And stock up to Johnny. That's another depth piece. So depth stock up, Gio stock up. I'm going to just kind of go exact opposite of Adams. Serginho Dest was stock up in the Ghana game, stock down in the Germany game, right? And similar to Adams, I think there's a future, right? I don't see the full replacement right now that I'm willing to say, we're playing Germany tomorrow, put this guy in ahead of him. But I think there's a potential future where it's like, we're playing Netherlands, or we're playing somebody who's going to be on the front foot against us. I think there's a future where it's like, not sure Dest is going to be right for this game. No replacement yet, but I think you could see that in Germany. I get Sane's amazing, but man, like you've got to be more competitive against Sane than Dest was. He was so uncompetitive. But in a game like Ghana, where we're going to get the ball, he might have been the best player on the field. Honestly,
one of them, yeah.
I really raved about Gio, but like what he did on the right side just constantly torched them and constantly created openings. So that was another guy that I had, and then stock down to the 4-3-3. Like the 4-3-3, the stock is just down right now in the 4-3-3. I think it could still have a place in what we do in terms of the tactical flexibility, but my stock is pretty down on it right now.
Yeah, to me, Gio, the stock didn't go up because I was expecting this from him. It's just one of those like, Pulisic and Balogun played well. The stock didn't move. They were still one of our top players. That's mainly why I never mentioned him. But going on, and Dest, all we need from Dest is for him to be bang average on defense. Just not be bad, just average. If he's average on defense, what he can offer going forward makes up for it. But he's not even average on defense. When he faces good opposition, he's pretty freaking bad on defense. That's the main concern.
And we've got to find a way to help him, right? I mean, like, do you remember it was Canada, right? And it was Davies. And I think we did a really good job.
We had Aronson harass Davies. Yeah.
Yeah. We kind of like funneled Aronson toward that side. And like, we've got to be able to do that to help Dest out.
Wait. Dest didn't play against Canada. Now that
I'm just saying our tactics to contain Davies, right? So those tactics to contain Davies, we're not going to leave our defender on an island, because whether he's Serginho Dest or the best defensive right back in the world, it's always going to be hard against these like elite dribblers, you know? And if you leave them on an island, they're going to lose a lot, right? So we've got to tactically just do a better job. You know, Greg, it's just, I know it's a random aside. It's not a part of what, like, got to do a better job tactically of going, oh, we have Leroy Sané versus Serginho Dest on the left side. Let's tactically figure out a way that we always have support for
Well,
him.
why didn't Greg maybe that game play Scally on the left and Dest on the right?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Scally, we've seen that Scally, at least defensively, can kind of hold his own against these Bundesliga players for the most part. At least he's done it a few times.
Yep.
While Dest continuously gets torched by the best players when he faces Saka, Mbappe, anyone he faces, it's always something like that. But Greg Berhalter rating, I'm going to give my rating here. I'm going to give Berhalter a 7.5. I thought it was a good camp from Greg. And even in Germany, when he made the halftime adjustment, subbing out Gio, and tactically he made the mistakes, he readjusted after that because he noticed the mistake, played Gio central. For the most part, put the best lineups possible, tested Christopher Lund, gave Johnny an opportunity. The second half subs, I don't really blame him because he had to rotate, had to rest the players. These are friendlies. If it was a competitive match, I'll say, what are you doing? It's a friendly. So I'm giving, actually, I think it would be even fair to give Greg possibly an 8 for this camp. I think it was a good camp from Greg Berhalter. Obviously, there's still some stubbornness there that he seems very reluctant to change sometimes, but we saw progress. We saw some changes. And even if it's slow at this point, because he put our standards so low, like you said, about the past 4 years, I'll take any progress. And I saw progress from Berhalter, so I'll give him an 8, actually.
So my biggest positive for Greg before I give my rating is that I was wondering if he would be too stubborn to try what worked this summer. I literally think that about some coaches, right? Some coaches are just stubborn humans, and Greg's pretty stubborn. It takes a while for him to like come around to certain ideas, certain players. And so I was wondering, like, is it going to take him a year to figure this thing out and to go back and watch those Nation League games and be like, there's something there, let me try it out. And so I give him a lot of credit because not only did he do that, but you could see some of his own wrinkles. So I think one wrinkle I really liked, and I think this wrinkle works even better when Jedi's back, is we in possession, we often went 3 in the back, kind of 3 across the back. It was a little different last night, but it was Scally, it was Richards, and it was Ream in the Germany game. And it was very clear and apparent 3 in the back. And then you would actually see Jedi on the left very intentionally flow to the middle of the field and Pulisic come out wide, right? Kind of like where that left wing back and left winger plays, which is where he's most comfortable. And in possession, I thought it was beautiful because, one, we had enough support if we turned it over that we had 3 in the back. This was first half. We didn't do this in the second half. We had 3 in the back, so we were ready to kind of like, take on their counters. We weren't pressed too far up the field, which we had been in the past with the fullbacks, right? With 2 fullbacks high. And then Dest in the middle is just awesome. He has that skill set of like a midfielder. It reminds me of how like Pep used Cancelo. Pep does that a lot, right? Inverts the fullback in there. So I love that. That's something a little bit different. I know
we've seen that with Dani Alves in Brazil in the past too.
Yeah, and Greg, somebody mentioned last night on Twitter, Greg's tried that with Adams. I was like, that's the wrong guy to try that with. Like, you don't want Adams, playing in the regista spots. You actually want him in the defensive back line, if anything. But anyway, I liked that. So I loved the way that he adjusted his attacking tactics. Way different, right? Where the spaces Gio was playing in is where our 9s have always played. And so I just give him a lot of credit for trying new things and not being stubborn. And I think no matter how much you hate him, you have to give him credit for that. And did it all work? No, but he was trying new things. So roster, great. Lineups, great. Didn't bring in, the MLS guys seem to be gone. His old kind of, stalwart, Morris, the vibes guys, that's gone. He's getting new guys involved, giving Maloney his first cap, getting Johnny back in. Like, there's just so much to love right now. I'll be honest. Like, I've been a harsh critic of Greg. That was a 10 out of 10 camp on Greg's scale, right? As an international manager, it was like a 7 out of 10. I thought he did a nice job overall.
Yeah, I mean, we got to rate it for what it is, and this is what this camp was. Now, to say I'm not concerned about the future would be a lie, because Berhalter has in the past randomly looked, oh, look, he's changing, and then he goes back to his old ways out of nowhere. Like, out of nowhere, just goes back. Like some things in the World Cup, it seemed like he was changing, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm not playing Gio in the World Cup, and Jesus Ferreira is going to start on the most important game against the Dutch. Like Greg has in the past shown signs of improvement, and then he shat the bed right after. So we've seen that before.
My biggest concern with Greg is like he gets ideas in his head, and it's like all or nothing, right? It's like like all in or nothing at all. And so like my worry is like, okay, he's got this new idea behind this way to use geo and what I just kind of talked about, right? It still can't be all or nothing with that, right? We have to have flexibility. We've talked about it all throughout this video, right? My biggest worry is like, can he figure out a way to be flexible enough to make the personnel and tactics meet the right game, right? And we have not seen that yet. We didn't see it this camp, right? Like second half personnel and tactics didn't meet the game. And I get there's some limitations in a friendly, but like very far off in both games, in my opinion.
Yes. And then lastly, the camp rating. I'm going to give this camp a 9 out of 10. I won't give it a 10 out of 10 because we didn't get the result against Germany. I understand it's a friendly, so the result doesn't matter too much. But at the end of the day, I wanted to see us make it scrappy and not Germany bully us in the second half, which they did bully us in the second half. So that's pretty much where I deduct the point. Outside of that, I have no complaints. I saw some progress. We saw Gio ball out. We saw Pulisic ball out. Balogun, a different system with Gio playing central. No more MMA right there. And the system got proven right. We saw Gio get a brace against Ghana. All that was very special, very good. We also saw the players unified. They looked very happy together. They looked like friends, which is something you want to see with these guys. It ended all those rumors that some stupid accounts on Twitter have put out that the players hate Gio because Gio's a spoiled brat. Well, guess what? It looked quite evident that the players don't hate Gio. And that was all a load of crap. I'm giving this camp a 9 out of 10. I thought it was good. I thought it was a very good camp. We progressed with this camp, unlike the September camp, which to me was close to a 0. Like it was literally useless against Oman and Uzbekistan. This one, not so much. Obviously, take the Ghana result with a grain of salt, the 4-0, because who knows? Like they seemed a bit disinterested. Regardless, they were disinterested. We ran over them. That's what you should do when the team's playing like that. What's your camp rating?
Yeah, so similar to you, like the results, it wasn't a 9 out of 10 for me in terms of like the everything, the process, the results. It wasn't a 9 out of 10. It's hard with that second half of Germany to say it's a 9 out of 10 results, but from a process standpoint, it was a 9 out of 10, right? When you do camps like this, the far more important thing is like, can you learn things, right? Getting stuff wrong in camps with friendlies is not a bad thing at all, right? If anything, it's a good thing because it probably means you are trying something out. So you learned what maybe is going to work or not going to work. One of my biggest problems with our team is like we were so reluctant to try new things, try new players. I've said that 5 times this video, but like I give this camp a 9 out of 10 because we tried new things. I think we hopefully learned a lot. Now, it could very quickly become a 5 out of 10 if we don't learn. You know, if Greg goes to the next camp and he's not learning and he's not making the right adjustments, then all this learning doesn't matter. But this learning can lead to some really special stuff. So I have it as a 9 out of 10 just because of the whole process. I think this is a great camp.
Next camp, he moves Gio back to the right wing.
Yeah, moves Gio back to the right wing, brings back in, Zimmerman and starts him back. Like, I don't know, there's a million things he could do. But right now I'm cautiously optimistic, Tack, right? And I'm with you, right? We've seen a lot from this exact manager we've seen our doctor, right, prescribe the wrong medicine to us a number of times over the last 5 years. So I don't know if we can fully trust it, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm willing to give him, a restart in my brain. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be nervous, but I'm willing to give him a restart. And this camp was a really good jump from camp number 1.
Yeah, and here's the thing. What we can't see every camp is the repetition of this. We need to see a little bit of progress every camp. Obviously, when you get to the World Cup, I don't care. Get results. Beat everyone 1-0 for all I care. But until then, we want to see progress because the more progress we make until 2026, the higher the odds of us pulling an upset here and there. Next step for me is that one. I want to see us make it scrappy against better opponents. Make it tough. Don't get pushed over like we did against the Dutch. Don't get pushed over like we did against Germany. Make it tough for them. That's the next step for me, the big challenge for Greg Berhalter. Everyone, leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Your players that had stock up, stock down, rate the camp, everything we debated here. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. I will be reading it. Hopefully, Adam, if he has time to, between basketball, NBA season starting that I know you follow. And Adam, thank you very much. Go follow Adam on Twitter. His handle is literally right below him. Go follow it. Great follow. That's why we have him here at the channel. Thank you very much, Adam.
Thanks, Tack.